the White Kenyan versus Tramadolito Quintana. For 5 years, we lived through duels on the cycling summits between two different ways of understanding the race. Two different styles on the bike. 3 continents facing each other for the cycling scepter. With 3 victories in direct duels for the Olympic medalist of the TUE for Bilharzia, and 1 triumph for the coffee rider who came to Europe by the hand of Vicente Beldevicedo. But it seems that with the arrival of the new cycling monsters, those times are long gone. Yet both legendary riders are still competing in the World Tour, and their quarrels are still alive and well on the road. In fact, Nairo has had to suffer 2 really unpleasant episodes in just 24 hours. Episodes which, in a not casual way, 3 former teammates of the YouTuber cyclist endorsed by a country at war were involved directly. It all started with the complaints of Wout Poels, the Flying Dutchman of Bahrain Victorious, in his podcast In Course with the sickly Dylan van Baarle. It's nothing but a copy of the authentic cycling podcast made by cyclists, the We Do of Lance Armstrong and George Hincapie, who show, yet again, their shark mentality, a mentality that many try to copy, without much success. To succeed on the internet, these millionaire cyclists need to pull clickbait and aggressive headlines, and the winner of Liège-Bastogne-Liège did not hesitate to drop one against Quintana, and especially against Ivan Garcia Cachopo, the complicated Asturian Movistar rider with whom he shared a stable in 2020. According to Poels, it all started on the ascent to the Col de Pradès on the Queen stage of the recent Volta Catalunya, the one where Poggi ripped apart the rest of the riders as if they were mere marionettes. But while the Slovenian was whistling merrily up the climb, behind him, Poels wanted to continue to perform at a good level, as it showed on the climb to Port Aine, where he came in a great 4th place alongside teammate Antonio Tiberi. The 37-year-old decided to follow the wheel of Movistar's Spanish beast, Enric Mas, and, at the Dutchman's insistence, the Spaniard's teammate Nairo Quintana appeared to defend him. So what did the Colombian do? Well, one of his favourite actions. He stuck out his elbow. A classic move of the Boyacan Condor in those Tour de France editions where he ended up climbing on top of the podium in Paris without making any attack, sponsored by the always conservative Movistar Friars. However, this offended Poels, who began to rebuke, in his own words, Nairo, telling him, insisting, has he taken Tramadol again? Can you imagine that? In full competition! And not only that, but in the podcast, he had no problem calling Quintana stupid for having taken Tramadol in the first place. But from here, well, we're not surprised. Poels knows well what he's saying. If you notice, he says that Tramadolito Quintana is stupid for having taken Tramadol. Why didn't he take the ketones that made Bahrain Victorious, the team of Poels and Padon and Colbrelli, fly until the Italian almost died, coincidentally in another Volta Catalunya? Friends, it's one thing for us to make jokes about Tramadolito in a jocular and harmless, affectionate tone, but for one millionaire pro to say it to another millionaire pro shows the real B-side of some of these creatures. Beings who are offended when a random journalist asks them questions about their monstrosities on the bike. But then they allow themselves the luxury of insulting another of their comrades for taking a substance that, at the time he tested positive for, was not doping. Can you imagine Laurent Fignon in 1984 calling Francesco Moser a dirty, doped-up doper of a man for using blood transfusions in his hour record when they were still allowed? And then it was that Garcia Cachopo, possibly infuriated by what had happened, punched Poels in the face. And this hurt him a lot. And then he evidently later cried the tale to the UCI. Now, we will never defend performances like that of the Spanish rider, but he had already had his punishment, a financial fine and a loss of UCI points. What do you want? To be punished like the former Bahrain rider Christian Koren for violating the anti-doping rules in Operation Adalas? In a sport where we've recently seen Sebastian Milano headbutting and Gianni Moscon showing his racist side and Dylan Groenewegen almost sending Fabio Jakobsen to his grave without any sanction, The Garcia Cachopo thing, well, it's minutiae, isn't it? Oh, dear friend Wout, the publicity for your podcast has been spectacular. And, coincidentally, another of your former fellow podcasters, the self-confessed alcoholic Geraint Thomas, has done rather well out of it too. Nairo Quintana spent his whole life trying to fulfill a yellow dream that he could never achieve. However, the former pistard, who was part of teams full of dopers, such as Ricardo Rico's Sonia Duval or Moises Dueñas Barlow World, was able to do so, thanks to being part of the marginal earnings team that did so well for cycling with its black trains of millionaire riders in the Alpine mountains. And although G is still focusing his efforts on the road, when he's not 12 nights out of 14 boozing in British drinking dens for drunks whose face veins turn purple, well then he's triumphing on the Geraint Thomas Cycling Club, a podcast where he regularly talks to teammates like Carlos Rodriguez, Egan Bernal, Laurens de Plus, the chemical-loving millionaire who pays his salary, or even fellow recreational hobbyists like Marion Rousse's partner. And of course, he's brought along to his podcast Chris Froome and several coaches who made him improve his performance on the bike. But he's never invited Dr. Richard Freeman, with whom he's shared years and years of work. And surely he could have given us many lessons on possession of doping substances or falsification of anti-doping tests, and this would be of great interest to many, many listeners. Someone who he did bring along was one of his buddies, Luke Rowe, and together they made fun of Tramadolito Quintana. Just one day after the episode of Wout Poels, the legendary gregario of Froome and Thomas teamed up with the Welsh geranium to charge against Nairo, calling him a rat, and that he should not be competing in cycling today, let alone be in the Giro d'Italia where he will come to lead his team. Rowe started laughing when Thomas called Nairo a rat, showing that they both think Quintana should be suspended and out of competitive cycling. Coincidentally, neither of them said anything when Froome tested positive for salbutamol in a Vuelta a España he won. And then there was the other Vuelta a España that he was given as a gift after an unprecedented sanction in cycling history to the doped bison of Dracula Gianetti's outfit. It's curious how these riders who complain when they are insulted, or when someone calls them dopers, and yet they allow themselves the luxury of doing it to others. Other riders who come from another continent, or have another skin colour, or are short and of humble origins. We remember how Lance Armstrong did it with Marco Pantani. It's good that they show their true face, though, and it's good that they keep doing their podcasts. More content for us. There's lovely.